Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial will show you how to paint a pumpkin spice latte fall themed painting on an 11 by 14 inch black canvas. And I am using a traceable template drawing for this, so you can print that out on just one sheet of paper and transfer that to your canvas, and I'll be showing you how to do that. Of course, you're welcome to draw the cup as well. I only used 5 colors for this painting. I used titanium white, Mars black, yellow oxide, burnt umber, and cadmium orange hue. And I did this on a black painted canvas. So I just used a regular white canvas, and I chose the Apple Barrel matte black. So when you prime your canvas with that matte color, it's going to give you a finish that's not shiny. So if you were to cover this with Mars black, it might give a little bit of a sheen, and that's okay if you want, but I wanted a matte look for the back so that the things in the foreground that we're going to paint on, those are going to be a satin sheen, so it actually lets it stand out a little bit better when you use matte black as the background. But that is up to you if you want to use that or just regular Mars black paint. That works fine too. So I'm going to show you how to transfer these traceables if you don't have the white graphite paper. I get asked this question a lot because the white graphite paper, it's not something that we readily have available, but you likely will have a piece of white chalk available, and I believe this also works with white color pencil. So basically you just print it out, and on the back of the design you rub the white chalk. So this method is a little bit more messier than the white graphite paper, but it works, especially since it's something that we readily have available. So you basically just rub the chalk. You don't have to rub the chalk on the entire paper, just where you see the design, so where you see the lines, and then you want to turn it over. So the bottom of the cup is about 2.5 inches from the bottom of the canvas. And then once you position that, I like to use a T-square ruler just to make sure everything's kind of lined up. And then you just take a pencil and you trace, and when you lift, your design is going to be transferred to the other side. You'll likely get extra chalk residue from doing this method. However, the chalk will erase, so a baby wipe is the best way to erase the chalk I have found. You can also erase unwanted chalk pieces with a wet paintbrush, but I find if you use the wet paintbrush, you get a little bit of residue after the wet paintbrush dries. The baby wipe helps to wipe up the residue. So I don't recommend you erasing extra chalk pieces until later on. When you do this method, it will be enough to see the design, and I'll lift this up to show you what that will look like here, just making sure I trace all of those basic lines so that pumpkin overlaps our cup a little bit in the front. We have our cinnamon sticks. And then when you lift off, you can see your design. So you can also see those extra chalk residues. You can try blowing it away, but like I said, at the very end of the painting, we can just simply get a wet baby wipe and wipe up wherever we want to. I'm going to go over some of these lines with my chalk, and you might want to do the same. So anywhere it needs to show up a little bit better, I'm doing this also so that it shows up better on the camera. Again, not necessary because you can see the design very clearly just from the transfer part. I am going to draw the table line. So we're going to take a ruler, preferably a T-square, so it's nice and lined up. Just going to do the table line. It's just below the bottom of that handle, so you can see where that handle is. That's where our line is going to be. And then we can start the painting. So I use 4 different brushes for this. I used a 3/4 flat, a 12 bright brush. I used that bright brush for the cup. I used 2 different rounds. I used this number 8 round, and that was used to create the whipped cream topping. And I used a number 4 round brush for the pumpkin. Of course, those brushes are listed in the materials section of this tutorial, and you don't have to use these exact brushes. So use whatever brush you have available, that is fine. I'm going to go ahead and load my palette with 3 colors. So these are the colors that are going to be in the Pumpkin Spice Latte: Burnt Umber, Yellow Oxide, and Titanium White. There's no orange in it, so just those 3 colors. And I'm going to start with my 12 bright brush, and I want to mix equal parts brown and I'm going to call that yellow. So brown and yellow mixed together. So our latte inside the cup is darker at the bottom and it fades to a lighter color at the top. So imagine the espresso being on the bottom of the latte, and then it gets kind of creamier where the milk is towards the top, and we have the foam at the top and our whipped cream. So we want to kind of mimic that in our painting. So we want to allow this to be darker at the bottom, and I'm using the bright brush just to do full width strokes, and I'm painting in a curved direction. So when you paint in that curved direction, you're going to give your cup some form just because your strokes are going in that curvy direction. And as I work my way up, I'm adding more of that yellow oxide to my brush, and I'll work down to blend it. Again, we want to fade it so that it's darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. When you get towards the top, you'll want to kind of wipe your brush off, because at that point you might have too much paint on your brush. Wipe it off a little bit on a towel or your palette. Grab the white and add the white at the top. You want to blend that white down into your yellow oxide. Keep in mind we want to stay in the parameters of that cup. So I just use the tip of my brush to loosely outline that top rim of the cup. Also notice the far left and right, there's a blank black spot there, and I'm doing that on purpose because I am going to go back and define that shape a little bit more. So for now, you're curved. You want to go as close as possible to the edge without reaching the actual chalk line, if that makes sense. So we have the curved strokes, we have the lighter color at the top, it fades to the yellow oxide, and it fades to the dark at the bottom. I'm going to wipe my brush off again and grab that brown, and I want to add a little bit more of that brown espresso color towards the bottom to make sure it is fairly dark at the bottom. Blend that up. Just be careful with your transition zone. So right here, that brown is transitioning to that yellow. You want to work that area a little bit more by going back and forth with your strokes. That will do the wet on wet blending, and that will blend your brown into the yellow. You'll end up with a few brown streaks up into the yellow area, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be a perfect gradient. I'm going to use a towel to wipe my brush off. At no point am I rinsing that off, because that kind of helps with the blending if we do this double loading thing where we load multiple colors on our brush. So I mentioned we did not go all the way to the edge. So for the edge, instead of the curved strokes, I'm going to go in vertical strokes, and I'm just using the tip of the brush to help cut in on that shape. So we have the edge of the cup, and we're doing kind of more vertical strokes there. So I'm painting vertically down, and then I'm going curved to let that curved part meet the edge. And that's how we're going to get that shape on the edge of the cup. I'm going to do it again over on the right side, and I'm using white and the yellow oxide color. It's going to show up lighter. I'm not really blending this vertical line down. I'm just going to blend it with the color that's already there. So you're using the tip of the brush to stroke vertically down to create the edge of the cup, and then you're doing curved strokes into the rest of the coffee color. Right here I am going to grab that brown because it should be dark in that area. So just curvy stroke down, really defining that edge of that coffee cup. And later on, we'll do some loose outlining with white to, really, this is a glass cup. I didn't mention this, but we are painting the inside of the cup right now. The glass part where the glare is and the outline of the shape of the cup, that's going to be done after this part dries. So this is the coffee, that liquid stuff that's inside of the cup that we're painting right now. So just going back, curved, and really you don't want to overwork this. So if you keep trying to blend it and it might all mesh together, it's okay if it's streaky in some areas. It's liquid. It could possibly be dark up at the top a little bit, or maybe there's a few white streaks at the bottom. That's okay. But overall, we have a gradient of light to dark. So once I have the liquid part painted, I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off and set it to the side. I'm going to grab my number 4 round brush. So I'm loading just the tip of that brush in the white, kind of twisting my brush. That helps to get that paint right there on the tip of the brush, and that's very helpful if you're going to be painting a thin line with your round brush. So we want to outline the shape of the cup. So this is essentially the glass part of the cup. Glass is clear, so we're not painting we're only going to be doing a glare over the liquid, but right now, since the liquid is still wet, we're just going to outline pretty much what we drew with the chalk. So we're just replacing that chalk line with this paint line. So I'm just going to do this as thin as possible. The consistency of the line, it doesn't have to stay the same thickness throughout, so that's okay. Just kind of loosely outlining that. And as I go to reload, I do twist my brush. That helps get that paint right there on the tip of the brush. And I'm just loosely outlining that chalk line. If there's still a little bit of a gap of the black showing through between the white line and the coffee color, that's okay. We can leave it that way. Mine doesn't have a lot of black still showing through, but if yours does, that's okay. And right here, the rim, I'm just loosely doing that with the white. And I will outline the left part, this left line as well. And this coffee cup is behind the pumpkin, so I'm going to pick up my line when I hit that pumpkin shape. So about right there. And then going back over this, I made that bottom part of the cup a little bit thicker and just a little bit more flatness at the bottom, so that cup is kind of more flatter on the table. So that's why I'm making that part a little bit more thicker. But if you mess that up, you can always go back with brown and kind of touch that up if you need to. So I can just take my brown and go back in and fill that part. And then we need to outline our handle as well. I'm going to go ahead and rinse that brown off my brush and grab my white again. And just go ahead and outline the shape of your handle. So we have 2 sets of lines. We have the inner part and the outer line of our handle. So basically what was traced onto the canvas with the chalk, we are painting over that with white. Next, we want to go ahead and prime the pumpkin. If we painted the pumpkin orange now, the orange will not show up very well against the black canvas. So we want to go ahead and apply a layer of white paint on the pumpkin first, let that white dry, and then we'll do the orange over that later. So I'm just taking my round brush and I'm painting one bump at a time. So the pumpkin's already drawn out for us, and we've got it's all sectioned up. So with each bump, I'm kind of just starting at the top and stroking downwards, kind of in a curved direction, but there's a little bit of a gap between each of the bumps, and I want to leave that black. So a little tiny bit of dark from the dark canvas still showing through so that we can still see the division of each bump. So you're just kind of creating a negative shadow there just by not painting that black piece. So leaving a little gap between each of the bumps, that's going to help us when we start painting it orange as well. We don't need multiple coats of white, so if your white isn't covering all the black 100%, that's okay. It's just enough so that it's primed, and when this is dry, we'll go ahead and paint it orange. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and do the whipped cream. So the whipped cream, I'm going to need to use a different brush, a larger brush preferably. So I'm going to put my 4 round down, and I'm going to grab the number 8 round brush. So it's a larger brush, load it in a generous amount of titanium white. I'm going to start at the top. I'm just going to loosely outline the left top peak of that cream and this curve right here. So we want to bring out this sort of cream curvy texture with the brush. And so when I'm painting this brush, I'm kind of starting out lightly first, but then pressing hard. When you press hard, that stroke gets a little bit thicker. So I'm basically just outlining the outer shape of that and kind of curving it inwards to get, that's going to establish the direction of your cream. And then you want to just very slowly start filling it in. So I'm just pressing harder on my brush. That creates a thicker sort of swirled stroke. Loading it, pressing hard. So kind of press loosely at first, but then press down on all your bristles. That gets your stroke to be thicker. And I'm making it go in the direction of each of those kind of curvy lines. This does not need to be 100% solid. In fact, it's better if you leave a little bit of that black still showing through. Gives it some darker, shadowy color to look at, but we'll also add some yellow and brown in there as well. So there's my first coat of that whipped cream. And I want to add a little bit more color into this. So it's not exactly 100% white. I'm going to grab some of that yellow oxide on my palette and mix white with the yellow oxide. So we have kind of a light yellow color now on my brush. And I'm going to start over here on the upper left part of the peak of that whipped cream, and just on the far left add that light yellow, but then quickly I'm going to take my finger and blend that in with the rest of the white. So this is going to kind of give our whipped cream some two-toned shading over here, and kind of swirled it starting from kind of the middle, and then I swirled it to the left and kind of curved down. So you don't want to add too much of this yellow. We still need it to be mostly white. Just taking my finger and using my finger to blend, went outside the lines, so I have a little baby wipe right there. I was able to wipe that off. So that's a useful thing to have if you mess up. As long as the paint is still wet, the baby wipe will wipe the paint off. Then I'm going to do another darker tone in here. Now grabbing that brown, mixing that brown with whatever's on my brush, and just a little tiny bit of brown on some of the edges over here where that swirl is, but not a lot of brown. I don't want to take over too much of that yellow. And again, I don't want this to be super dark. So it should be bright and white. So there's some darker two-tone color in the whipped cream. And if you want, you can go back and add more white into that. Just make sure you rinse the brush off, grab more white. So I'm just going back here with a second coat. That's going to make that second layer of white brighter, especially on some of those edges. It's going to give us some more dimension in our whipped cream. Just kind of swirling it with the direction of that shape. Swirl it inwards. That overlaps some of my yellow color a bit. Just try not to overdo it. The little, we'll be adding little brown dots over this later that might kind of disguise it a little bit better, gives it some more texture, cinnamon texture. Just going to take my finger, kind of gently blend it, but I'm not going to really overwork this too much. I think right here needs a bit more white. Got another little curved white piece. Next, we are going to apply the table color to this, and I'm going to be using the 3/4 inch flat wash brush. I'm going to load it in the titanium white and brown, kind of equal parts white and brown. You don't want a lot of paint on your brush. You want just a little bit of paint on the tip of the brush, because when you do this, it should look very dry. We're doing a dry brush style table. We are utilizing the black background to create that faux wood texture, the darker part of it, and this lighter part is just going to make that lighter part of the grain. We're keeping this very simple, very basic. We're not making this look like real wood. It's just a very light, subtle dry brush of brown and white. Just do left and right strokes across the canvas to fill in your table area. If it is showing up too bright, too opaque, and giving too much coverage, you might want to wipe some more paint off your brush using a towel, just so that it shows up nice and dry. So what I chose to do here is apply just the brown to my brush and not the white, to kind of do a little bit of shadow under my cup and pumpkin. So with just the brown, kind of a blobbed area of the brown just under both of those objects. Later on, we can go back and add more of a darker like black if we want to do that later. But for now, I'm just adding that brown, and we could fix that later if we wanted to. Next, I'm going to do the cinnamon sticks. So I did that with a number 4 round brush, and we need the burnt umber and titanium white. So the reason why I need to mix white with this brown is because we're working on a dark background. So using that titanium white in our color is going to help it show up brighter and more opaque. This brown is kind of a translucent color, but it's also a dark color. So if I didn't add white to this, it wouldn't show up very bright. It's still showing up kind of dark, but that's okay. So I'm basically just outlining the shape of the cinnamon stick. That's a little rectangle with a little circle at the top. We can always highlight this and shadow it later because there's 2 sticks that we want to stand out. So I'm doing the little oval and the little rectangle that goes down to the whipped cream. So it's behind our whipped cream. We don't see it actually going inside the cup. And I'm going to load some black to my palette. So this is the first time I'm loading Mars Black onto my palette. I'm going to grab that black, and I'm just going to, there's a line that divides those 2 cinnamon sticks. So I just did a black line. And also I outlined the top oval of each of those sticks. So now they both stand out, and that top oval stands out as well. Then I rinsed the black off my brush and mixed the yellow with the brown to kind of make a lighter brown. I'm going to highlight. So I'm going to pick one side of the cinnamon stick. I picked the right side of it, and I just painted the lighter color and kind of blended it in with the rest of that dark brown color. That gives it enough of a lighter color to give it that two-tone look and also make it look a little bit 3D-ish and not just solid brown. Next, I'm going to paint the little cinnamon dots on the whipped cream, and I'm doing that with the brown and the number 4 round brush. So just brown on the tip of the brush, and you're going to stipple little brown dots on your whipped cream. So just take the brown and make sure that paint is right there on the tip, and just do little brown dots all over, so little clusters of cinnamon dots pretty much all over the whipped cream. You can cluster it so some areas have a little bit more dense cinnamon dots, and some of it's kind of more spread out in other areas. So you just want to kind of mimic what it would look like if we were to sprinkle cinnamon on top of this whipped cream. This next step is optional, but it may be helpful to outline this rim with a little bit of black so that we have a division of the top rim of the cup and where that bottom part of the whipped cream is. So I just took that black and re-outlined that top rim. So we have a division line from the cream on top of our liquid glass. So we need to start kind of working on the reflection of this. So there's some reflection sort of dots on the handle, and there's also reflection glare over the liquid part to create the glare of the glass. So making sure that your painting is dry, I'm going to take this baby wipe and just kind of erase some of this excess chalk residue, and that's going to help clear out any parts of that chalk that we don't really want to see. I still want to keep that pumpkin stem. I haven't painted the pumpkin stem yet. Any excess chalk, just kind of clean that up a little bit. Really careful around areas where that paint might still be wet, but especially on the handle, because we're going to work on the handle first and start doing a little bit of reflection on the handle. So with the number 4 round brush, grab some titanium white on it, and then we want to just kind of create these little sort of marks in the center part of the handle to kind of represent that glare of the glass, just a few little kind of curvy marks along the handle inside. Maybe there's some vertical lines, but you want to leave a lot of that black still showing through. And in fact, you can go back with some more of that Mars black and just kind of add more darker in there because it's a glass handle and we need most of that background still showing through. So just a few little curvy white dot things on the handle. And then to do the reflection on the glass cup, we want to switch our brush to that 12 bright brush, and we are going to do this dry brush style. So you want to load the tip in titanium white. You want to get a towel and wipe it off. So that ensures there's only a little bit of paint on the tip of that brush. There's a reflection in the bottom right. So we're going to do like a little curve, bottom right. It should be very thin, scratchy, not solid at all. Wipe the paint off again. A reflection on the top curve, just under the rim and vertically on the left. So curve, vertical, kind of like a sideways L. And then I'm going to go back and make that left glare a little bit brighter and make that curve a little bit brighter. Maybe some very, very subtle curved lines along the middle part of the glass, but we don't want to overdo it. Again, it's a clear glass cup, so we don't want glares all over the place. We still want to see that coffee showing through. I want to emphasize that top glare. So I took my round brush and with the bottom right and the upper left corner glares, I did a kind of a thicker, more solid white line just in the middle of it. But for the most part, it's dry brush and see-through. And I also decided to kind of highlight my cinnamon sticks a little bit more. So I outlined the outer edge and also loosely outlined the top little swirl pieces. Touching that brown up just a bit. So you can see the difference that that white makes in terms of creating contrast in our painting. Adding that glare makes that glass look very shiny. I'm going to do a very subtle little touch up on the inside bottom part of the glass. I'm taking the black and just adding a little bit of outline on the very, very bottom of the cup so that liquid isn't touching the very, very bottom. There's just a black little line that divides liquid and that bottom white line. And there was still white on my brush when I did that, but I started to add a little bit of black shadow under the cup, and I just decided to leave that little white glare there. If you wanted to do that, you can do that too, or you could not put a white glare there on the table. It's not making a huge difference either way. And then we can go ahead and paint our pumpkin next. So our pumpkin was painted white first, and now we can add orange to our palette. So instead of just letting this be solid orange, we're going to utilize the yellow oxide and the brown on our palette to create different kinds of shades in our orange, so it's not just solid orange. I'm going to start in the middle bump. So when I do pumpkins, I do one bump at a time, and I like to start at the top and stroke downwards, although I don't always start at the top. Sometimes I start at the bottom and stroke up, but you really want to curve the strokes so that they create that shape. So I'm painting kind of in an oval direction for this middle bump. And before that dried, I just added a little bit of white at the top. For the next bump, for that to stand out, we need that orange to be kind of a different kind of orange. So I added more yellow oxide into that. And the stick kind of just painted that from the top to the bottom, just painted that shape. You're going in the direction of that curve. And pretty much each of the bumps is going to have a little bit variation in orange and yellow and brown. So as we get to some of these bumps in the back, we could possibly add brown into our orange. So I grabbed a little bit of brown. You can see I'm just kind of making up colors on my palette. Yours will look different because you're probably mixing the paint differently, and that's okay if you're using a different proportion. All I did was I grabbed a teeny tiny bit of brown and just kind of mixed it with my orange, and that's okay to just kind of make up colors on your palette. So taking more of that brown and orange, I grabbed a little bit of water. That water will help loosen that paint a little bit, kind of thin it out, get it to spread easily. But you can see each of these bumps have just slight variations in that orange, and I'm just painting that what was painted white earlier. I'm just going back over it with my different made up colors of oranges. And that black line that we left is still showing. So we still have the black gap from the background still showing through. We didn't paint that ourselves. It was just the negative space from the color of the background. And then if you want to get advanced with your pumpkin, you can add some shadowing. So I'm using the burnt umber to just kind of on the bottom stroke up. And I'm doing this before the orange dries, so it kind of blends with that orange. So I'm just stroking upwards and that brown gently blends. You can use your finger to kind of help blend it. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint the stem. So I'm going to get all that orange left over, rinsing my brush off and loading my palette with some new burnt umber. So the stem is dark. I'm going to start with that burnt umber, but if I need to, I can add some white. So if you're painting this and it's showing up too dark, I'll move my hand out of the way. But basically I'm painting the base of the stem first, and the stem kind of curves to the right. If you want to change the style of stem, you're welcome to do that. So if you don't want it to be curvy, if you want it to be more straight, you can do that. And then taking that white and kind of gently blending it. So that brown showed up too dark, but adding that white into it will lighten that brown up to make it show up brighter. We can highlight the stem by adding a little bit extra white on one side of the stem, and we can shadow it by adding some black on the right side of the stem, but I'm going to leave it like this for now. And then I'm going to add some lighter color to the top of the pumpkin. So I'm going to mix white with the yellow oxide to create a lighter color, and just at the top, just kind of stroking downwards at the top. The orange may or may not be dry all the way, so it might be blending with it. If not, it just adds another lighter layer just at the top and then creates that more of that 3D look in the pumpkin. For this next step, you'll need a pencil because we will be writing out the word pumpkin spice. So I recommend, and the lettering is optional. If you don't want to write pumpkin spice on this, you don't have to. Or if you want to do a different quote or different words, like hello fall, you can do that as well. So you can customize this. But I'm just going to, in cursive, write out my pumpkin spice. Again, we want to do this in pencil first so that we get the spacing of the lettering right. It's not fun to write this in paint it or the paint pen and then realize we don't have enough room. So when you have your letters all written out, you can get your paint pen. So this is a white Posca paint pen. If you don't want to use the paint pen or don't have a paint pen, you can just paint this. So several of my tutorials, if you follow me, I have quotes that I either use a paint pen for, or sometimes I'll just use the paintbrush and paint the words in. So it just kind of depends on how I feel. So the paint pen, the Posca paint pens don't always show up super bright. So this one's showing up fine. I think maybe because I used the matte finish, it shows up better this time around. But I did use this one time on a satin finish and it didn't really show up that bright and it needed a second coat. So who knows, maybe that could be what it is. But it showed up nicely. So I just outlined the letters. If you have leftover from the pencil, you can just erase that after it dries. And I did a few little highlights on my stem and a few little curved highlights on the top part of the pumpkin. So that just gives it that extra pop. The next thing we're going to do is draw our leaves. So we have 3 falling leaves and we have one that's kind of resting on the table. This one is I'm going to let the writing dry before I erase extra pencil lines. But I am going to go ahead and draw my leaves. So this one in the upper right is kind of a basic leaf, like a little teardrop shape with the little stem lines, but I wanted some more complex leaves falling down. If you wanted to do all simple leaves, you can. So for the complex leaves, I did the middle stem line first and just kind of wavy lines around it to kind of form the shape of the leaf. The one that's on the table, it doesn't show up with a pencil because there's paint right there. So I'm going to use a piece of chalk to draw that leaf. So I did the little line, so a curved line, and then around your curved line we have this sort of organic, curvy shape going around the line. And we're going to go ahead and paint the leaves, and I'm going to be impatient and erase this. So the paint pens dry relatively fast. I'm getting all of that part erased. So that shows up nicely with no pencil marks still showing through. And so so there's a little bit of chalk residue. The eraser will erase chalk residue, but you still might need to get a wet baby light wipe if there's still some of that showing. The leaves I did with basically the colors that are on my palette. So the orange, the yellow oxide, the brown, the white, the black, those 5 colors. You can use all those colors in your leaves. And I'm going to go ahead and freshen my palette here. So we have the orange and the yellow oxide. The yellow oxide, it tends to be an opaque color. The orange isn't. So if I were to just paint the leaf orange, it wouldn't show up very bright. So mixing the yellow oxide with the orange, that's going to create that bright opaque color that we want so it shows up. We still might need to do a couple coats of this because I can already tell there's a little bit of that black still showing through. Although that's not the end of the world if that black is showing through, because it kind of is a chalkboard style painting, and it's okay if we have some of that black showing through. But if you want it to be super opaque, you can do multiple coats. You can also paint the leaves white first, like what we did with the pumpkin, and then paint over your leaves if you want super bright leaves. So with that simple one, I just did a blend of the orange and the yellow and just kind of I mixed the colors together first, but then I kind of added more of each of those individual colors and kind of did wet on wet blending on the canvas. So whatever makes sense. I'm not going to do super realistic, complicated leaves. They're very simple. The focus really is the coffee, and the leaves are more of an accent. So you can kind of be more simple and abstract with the leaves. So I kind of did the same thing with this table leaf with the orange and the yellow, but I'm going to start introducing brown as well to give it some more color variation. And also we can utilize the white. And if you want to utilize the black too, you can do that to add kind of gray tones. I'm going to use the black later on when I outline the stem and do some of the leaf veins. I'm just taking some of that lighter color and just kind of adding it to one side of the leaf and just kind of letting that blend in, and then taking that darker color. So on this bottom part of the leaf, I just incorporated some of that brown in there and just kind of let that loosely blend together. So leaves have different variations of brown and orange and yellow and some lighter white and maybe some darker tones in there as well, kind of a calico effect. And you can make each leaf different, or if you want to simplify this, I did mention earlier that our goal was to simplify the leaves, you can just paint them a solid color, and that should be fine as well. So I'm kind of doing the same thing, making up colors on my palette, mixing oranges with the yellows and the browns, and just filling in each of those leaves solid. So I'm not doing the stem yet, I'm just doing the leaf shape. So this upper right leaf, I'm doing a second coat, kind of with that white that mixed with the orange, just to brighten it up. I'm going to do a second coat But as I'm doing this second coat, I'm not filling in the entire leaf, just one half of the leaf. Just brightening up part of that leaf. It gives it a two-toned look. And then these stems are going to be darker. If you have a brown paint pen, you can paint the stems with a brown paint pen. I'm going to do it with the paintbrush. And I'll be using the number 4 round brush. I'm going to grab white and brown and mix it together. If I did it with just the brown, it wouldn't show up very well. So white and brown to make that brown lighter. I loosened it with water just so when I paint these thin lines, it'll be easier. Twist the brush to get that paint distributed right on the tip of the brush. So each of the stems is just a little curved line, the little tiny dot on the end of the stem. So each of the curves kind of goes with the direction of the leaf. However, we drew them with our pencil. So that one. Again, if you have a brown paint pen, that would work nicely. The brown paint pen will show up opaque against the black background. So for the middle line, ideally you want this to be dry, but I wasn't being patient here. I took the black and I did a very, very thin middle line, but I didn't let that line go all the way to the end of the leaf, just a little line kind of going 3/4 of the way, and just a few little lines kind of going out diagonally to create the little veins of the leaf. We don't have to do too many details and just keep it simple. I'm going to add a little pop of black to our leaf on the table, just on the bottom part, so loosely outlining the edge on the bottom. Because that part is touching the table, it kind of gives it a little bit of dimension or a little bit of shadow under there. And then I'm going to take my black and add a little bit more shadow under the pumpkin. Nothing too crazy, just a few little light dry brush strokes under our pumpkin. I'm not going to add any more shadow under the coffee cup because I'm going to leave it just how it is. This painting is coming to its conclusion, so if you wanted to add more leaves, more details in it, you are welcome to. I am calling it finished, but one last thing that I would recommend is just making sure your pencil lines, chalk lines, anything that's still kind of showing through, just kind of clean that up and make sure your painting is dry when you do that. Hope you enjoyed painting this tutorial. Thanks for watching and thanks for painting with me.